You feel everything. Other people's pain, the tension in the room, the things no one says, but you still pick up. But have you noticed? The more you feel, the more they take. In this video, we'll uncover the dark side of empathy, the part no one talks about. Carl Jung warned us, when you suppress your anger, your ego, your limits, you don't become enlightened, you become a target. Do you keep saying yes when you mean no? Do you feel drained, invisible, taken for granted? Maybe your empathy has gone too far. And today, you'll learn the cost of that, and how to take your power back. This isn't just about empathy, it's about survival. It's about drawing the line between compassion and self-betrayal, and understanding why those who give too much often lose themselves in the process. If you've ever felt like your kindness is being used against you, this video is your wake-up call. Have you ever felt drained after listening to the suffering of others? As if the weight of their pain suddenly lands on your shoulders, and you don't know where their emotions end and yours begin? This is the silent pain of the empathic, an almost invisible but devastating condition. No one notices, but you feel everything. And it's not just uncomfortable, it's painful. What no one tells you about empathy is that it comes with a price, and often, that price is paid silently within the heart of the empath. Being empathetic is a rare gift. You understand other people's emotions with a clarity few possess. But here's the paradox. That same gift that makes you so capable of feeling others' pain can also become the source of your own suffering. When you become a detector of other people's pains, what happens to your own? At some point, what was meant to be an extraordinary ability ends up becoming a cross you carry endlessly, leading to emotional and physical exhaustion. And then the question arises, where does your own self end, and where do others begin? It's easy to see how this suffering remains hidden. Society praises the empathic, but the true pain of the empath is rarely recognized. The empath doesn't make a show of their pain. They carry the burden of feeling what others feel, without anyone ever seeing it. But when you feel so much, what is left for you? Who takes care of you? The empath often doesn't even realize that they are losing themselves in the suffering of others. After all, who sees the silent sacrifice of someone who is always there for others? The silent pain of the empathic doesn't just come from drying tears or listening to words. It comes from absorbing all that emotional energy, which ends up replacing their own identity. It's a pain that stays in the shadow, a pain you can't show to others. No one sees, no one feels, but it's always there, constant, like an internal pressure. The question becomes, how can this pain grow without the empath noticing? What happens when they begin to lose control over their own identity, absorbing too much? Over time, this process becomes a vicious cycle. The empath feels more, and doesn't know how to stop. Empathy turns into a burden, but the empath, out of pure compassion, doesn't know how to set boundaries. They become a prisoner of other people's pain, without realizing they are losing the ability to feel their own truth. How can they break free from this cycle? And more importantly, how can an empath reconnect with their true self without sacrificing their ability to understand others? This is the big dilemma. The empath sacrifices to keep others well. But who's to say that sacrifice won't destroy them? Who will help them set boundaries? And if they don't learn to protect themselves, what's left of them in the end? This is the beginning of something deeper. A journey where the empath must finally learn to reconnect with themselves. Let's get one thing clear. Empathy is not just about understanding how someone feels. It's the ability to feel what they feel, to connect with their emotions in a way that goes beyond mere intellectual comprehension. But when does this gift cross the line from being a healthy connection to a destructive force? There's a tipping point where your compassion stops being about the other person and starts becoming about you losing yourself. When does the line between helping others and neglecting yourself begin to blur? You've probably heard it said that you can't pour from an empty cup. But when you're too empathic, you don't just pour until you're empty. You keep giving even when the cup is cracked. You pour until there's nothing left. This is where empathy becomes a trap. You're giving so much that you forget to check if you even have anything to give. This self-neglect starts small, almost imperceptible. But it grows until you realize you've abandoned your own needs, desires, and boundaries. And by then, it's too late. You've already become the person you were trying to save. So, when does empathy become self-sacrifice? It happens the moment your sense of self is defined by what others need from you. This is when you start to lose your identity, when your boundaries become fuzzy, and you no longer know where you end and the other person begins. It's not always obvious. At first, you might feel like you're just a good person or helpful. But over time, you realize that the role you've created for yourself isn't based on authenticity. It's based on the constant need to fulfill the emotional needs of others at the expense of your own. In some ways, you might not even realize how deep this goes. It's easy to tell yourself that you're helping because it's the right thing to do. But how often do you ask yourself, why am I helping? Is it because you truly want to, or is it because you fear rejection? Is it because you want to be seen as the savior, the hero? This is where empathy starts to tip into unhealthy territory, when it's motivated by the fear of being unloved or unwanted. And that fear creates a compulsion to help, even when it's detrimental to your own well-being. You might be wondering, what's wrong with helping others? The issue arises when helping becomes a means of self-avoidance. When you help others to distract yourself from your own feelings, your own unresolved trauma, your own anger. It's easy to get caught up in the idea of being the person who fixes everyone else. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The more you neglect your own self-care, the more you will attract situations and people that drain you. The need to feel needed becomes a trap. And it's a trap that, once you're in it, is hard to escape. Now think for a moment, do you recognize this in yourself? Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the weight of someone else's emotions, yet still felt obligated to carry it for them? If you're honest with yourself, you might find that these feelings have become a pattern. This is the point where you have to stop and ask, when did this begin? When did your empathy become a way to avoid facing your own darkness? Because that's the line we cross when empathy stops being a gift and starts being a prison. Let's dive into the concept of the persona, a term from Jungian psychology that holds the key to understanding why so many of us overextend our empathy. The persona is the mask we wear in society, the version of ourselves that we show the world to fit in, to be accepted. It's the social role we play, the expectations we live up to. But here's the catch. The more you wear this mask, the more you lose touch with who you truly are beneath it. And that's where empathy, once a beautiful gift, starts to become a trap. From childhood, many of us are conditioned to think that to be loved, to belong, we must be good. We must please others. This is how empathy, which begins as a natural response to the emotions of others, becomes twisted. It's no longer about true connection, it's about performing. The good person role becomes the persona that shields us from rejection, from the pain of not being accepted. But what happens when your entire identity is built on pleasing others, on suppressing your true self? You become a mere echo of what others expect you to be. Have you ever felt like you're playing a part, even in your closest relationships? You're giving and giving, but do you ever stop to question if the empathy you're showing is really yours? Or is it just the persona doing the work for you, trying to maintain its image of perfection? This is where the too empathic behavior starts, when your desire to be seen as the compassionate, understanding person takes over. You become a servant to your own image, not a true reflection of your inner self. Jung spoke about the persona as a protective mechanism, a way to survive in a world that judges you based on what you present outwardly. But the danger lies in the fact that the more you hide behind this mask, the more distant you become from your own truth. Your true feelings, your true needs, are buried under a facade of empathy, politeness, and accommodation. You stop checking in with yourself because you're too busy maintaining the image of the person everyone else wants you to be. Think back to your childhood. Were you rewarded for being good, for being the helpful one? Or were you told to be more like someone else, to fit into a mold? The problem isn't the empathy itself, but the role you were taught to play. Your empathy became a tool of survival, a way to gain acceptance, not a way to connect on a deeper level. And now you're stuck. You might believe that being the good person is your only identity, but you've lost sight of who you truly are. The problem is, you've been so busy trying to be loved, you've forgotten how to love yourself. This is where the question gets uncomfortable. How much of your empathy is real? How much of it is a performance, a mask that hides your anger, frustration, and the needs you've neglected? We've all been there, playing the role, feeling like we have no choice but to help, to give, to care. But in doing so, we've allowed ourselves to be consumed by the very thing that should be our strength. And the moment you realize this, you'll see how much power you've been giving away without even knowing it. Let's talk about something darker now, the shadow of the empathic. It's the side we don't want to acknowledge, but it's there, growing silently in the background. You see, every time you suppress your own anger, frustration, or resentment for the sake of others, it doesn't disappear. It's buried. But like any repressed emotion, it doesn't stay hidden forever. The more you ignore it, the more powerful it becomes. It builds, and eventually it will demand to be seen. That is the shadow, the dark, hidden part of ourselves that we refuse to face. Here's the paradox. The empathic person often believes they are pure, selfless, and untouchable by negative emotions. But this purity is merely a mask. In truth, their unchecked empathy is a breeding ground for suppressed anger, bitterness, and unmet needs. These emotions, though buried deep, aren't gone. They manifest in subtle ways, in sudden bursts of frustration, in passive-aggressive behavior, or in relationships that drain them. Your kindness becomes a smokescreen, and behind it, resentment grows like a silent storm. Do you find yourself feeling drained, burned out, or frustrated with the very people you try to help? What's worse is that the more you deny this shadow, the more it will show up in unexpected places. Your energy, which was once devoted to others, will slowly be siphoned away, leaving you with nothing but emptiness. This emptiness turns into self-doubt, guilt, or worse. You begin to believe that your value lies solely in what you can give. And when you can't give anymore, you feel lost. Jung often spoke of the shadow as the parts of ourselves that we reject, the aspects we find too shameful or dangerous to confront. But here's the kicker. Embracing the shadow is what leads to true self-empowerment. You can't be truly compassionate if you haven't made peace with your own darkness. By avoiding your rage, your disappointment, and your pain, you trap yourself in a never-ending cycle of self-sacrifice. Only by acknowledging these hidden parts can you break free from the chains of toxic empathy. Why do you keep denying your own anger? Why do you keep telling yourself that you should always be the good one, the one who never gets upset, the one who always forgives? The truth is, you are not as pure as you think. But that's liberating, isn't it? Because the moment you acknowledge your shadow, you no longer have to carry the weight of false perfection. You can stop pretending to be someone you're not, and that's when the real healing begins. Let's face it, it's easier to hide behind kindness, to wear the mask of the perfect empath, than to deal with the messier parts of being human. But until you confront that mess, until you face the parts of yourself you've been avoiding, you'll never break free from the cycle of endless sacrifice. The truth hurts, but it also sets you free. You are not as good as you think, and that's okay. In fact, it's the first step toward becoming whole again. Do you ever feel like the more you give, the more you attract people who drain you? It's almost as if the universe has a cruel way of rewarding your kindness by bringing toxic individuals into your life. But have you ever stopped to wonder why? Why is it that the more you try to be good, the more manipulative and self-serving people seem to target you? The answer lies in the way your boundaries, or lack of them, act as an invitation for exploitation. Toxic people have a sixth sense for detecting those who have no limits, and they're quick to take advantage. Jung spoke about how the things we avoid confronting in ourselves inevitably turn against us. If you've never been taught to set boundaries, to recognize your own worth, or to say no, you make yourself an easy target. Toxic people know this. They see your endless kindness and interpret it not as a gift, but as a weakness. They latch onto you like parasites, feeding off your need to please, your desire to fix, and your fear of confrontation. And the worst part, you let them. You allow them to feed off your energy, because you don't know any other way to exist in relationships. What if I told you that your so-called goodness is the very thing making you miserable? That your inability to set boundaries is attracting the very people who will never care about your needs? It's uncomfortable to admit, but your people-pleasing tendencies, your need to be liked, are making you a target. You attract toxic people not because you are inherently bad, but because you have trained yourself to ignore your own needs in favor of theirs. You've taught the world that you are an endless well, and they've learned how to take advantage of that. Ask yourself, how many times have you let someone cross your boundaries? How many times have you stayed quiet to keep the peace, only to feel violated and drained later? Toxic people aren't attracted to your goodness. They are drawn to your lack of self-awareness. They sense your fear of being alone, your fear of conflict, and they use that against you. But here's the catch, you can't blame them. You allowed this to happen. You've neglected your own sense of self-worth, and, in doing so, you've invited them into your life. It's a bitter truth to swallow, but the moment you start recognizing your own worth, your own power, everything changes. The world will stop taking you for granted. People will stop using you as a doormat when you learn to say no, when you stop fearing the fallout of setting boundaries. And this isn't just about protecting yourself from toxic people. It's about reclaiming your own life, your own energy, and your own identity. The moment you stop allowing others to dictate your value, you start attracting the right people, the right energy. So let me ask you this, what are you afraid of? Why do you continue to give your power away? Every time you ignore your own needs to please someone else, you are reinforcing a cycle that will only lead to resentment. It's time to break free from that. You're not here to be everyone's savior. You're not here to sacrifice yourself for people who will never truly appreciate it. Start setting your boundaries now, and watch as the right people start to show up. The moment you stop tolerating toxic energy is the moment you start creating space for real, authentic connections. If this resonates with you, take a step further in this journey. Subscribe and dive deeper into how you can reclaim your power, set boundaries, and transform your relationships. Have you ever noticed that the more you give, the emptier you feel inside? That you constantly give your time, your energy, your love to others, but somehow, no one is giving that same effort back. It's like you're trapped in a never-ending cycle of giving, hoping for recognition, but only feeling drained in the end. You've convinced yourself that helping others is what defines you. But here's the truth. The real reason you keep sacrificing yourself isn't because you love others. It's because you fear being unloved. You fear being abandoned if you don't constantly give. This is where your empathy becomes a prison. It's no longer a tool of connection. It's a desperate need for validation. You don't just help because you care. You help because the fear of rejection, the fear of not being seen as a good person, has taken hold of you. And when this fear drives your actions, it becomes self-destructive. You're not helping out of genuine love or compassion. You're helping to escape the unbearable discomfort of feeling unloved, unwanted, or unseen. And the more you do it, the more you lose sight of who you really are. But let me ask you this. What happens when you constantly put others first, when you make their needs your priority? You start to ignore your own. You sacrifice your own well-being in exchange for the temporary relief of feeling needed. In doing so, you not only neglect your own growth, but also lose touch with your true self. The more you help, the more you become a shadow of who you were meant to be. Your identity becomes so entangled in the lives of others that you forget what it means to exist for yourself. This is the danger of unchecked empathy. It becomes a mask, a moral obligation that disguises a deeper issue. When helping others becomes a compulsion, it's no longer about love or connection. It's about avoiding the painful reality of your own emptiness. You avoid looking at your own needs, your own desires, because confronting them feels too vulnerable. So you bury them under layers of good deeds, under the illusion that you're helping, but in reality, you're simply hiding. When was the last time you truly stopped to ask yourself, what do I need right now? How often do you make decisions based on what they need, rather than what you need? It's easy to get caught in the trap of self-sacrifice, of believing that your worth is defined by how much you can give to others. But that's a dangerous game to play. The more you give, the more you deplete yourself. The more you neglect your own needs, the more you disappear. Empathy, in its purest form, should enrich both you and the person you're helping. But when it becomes a way to avoid your own pain, it turns toxic. You don't just fail to help yourself. You trap yourself in a cycle of perpetual giving that takes you further away from the person you were meant to be. It's time to break the cycle. It's time to recognize that true empathy starts with self-awareness. You cannot pour from an empty cup, and you cannot heal others when you're broken yourself. You've spent your life catering to others, hiding your true emotions, and constantly putting yourself second. But what happens when you decide to stop? What happens when you stop sacrificing yourself on the altar of empathy and start embracing the fullness of who you are? This is where the journey of individuation begins. Carl Jung described it as the process of becoming the person you were always meant to be, beyond the persona, beyond the shadow. But it's not easy. To embark on this path, you must confront the very things you've avoided: your rage, your ego, your frustration, and your deepest fears. These are not your enemies. They are the raw materials for your transformation. Individuation isn't just a spiritual quest, it's a psychological war. The war is fought against the parts of yourself that have been repressed or hidden away for so long. The false ideas about who you should be must be shattered, and only then can you begin to rebuild. This process requires you to face your shadows head-on. Jung taught that you can't become whole by imagining only light and goodness. You must also confront the darkness within you. Only then can true self-awareness and personal power arise. You can't skip this step, no matter how uncomfortable it might seem. Ask yourself this: how much of your life has been spent appeasing others, pretending to be something you're not, just to maintain the illusion of peace? How much of your energy has been wasted trying to make everyone else happy, leaving you drained and unfulfilled? If you're ready to break free, you have to start with the recognition that the good you've been clinging to might be the very thing that's kept you from being truly alive. True compassion doesn't come from endless self-sacrifice, it comes from self-respect. If you can't respect yourself, how can you genuinely offer respect and empathy to others? The first step in individuation is realizing that your worth doesn't depend on how much you give to others or how much you suppress your own needs. You have to ask yourself, what would my life look like if I stopped hiding behind my empathy and started honoring my true self? What would it feel like to be seen, not for what you do for others, but for who you truly are? The road to individuation isn't paved with more empathy. It's paved with more self-awareness, self-acceptance, and ultimately self-love. Empathy without boundaries becomes a trap. And when you stop using your empathy to escape your own discomfort, you begin the process of real personal growth. To be whole is to recognize that your empathy, in its purest form, can only flourish when it is balanced with your own identity. You must first know who you are, before you can authentically connect with others. So, as you confront your shadows, ask yourself, am I willing to see my whole self? Jung's words resonate deeply here. One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. The darkness, the things we fear about ourselves, the things we've buried beneath layers of people-pleasing and self-sacrifice, this is where the light will emerge. The more you understand and embrace your shadow, the more you integrate it, the more powerful and free you become. The individuation process is not a journey toward perfection, it's a journey toward wholeness. It's the moment when you stop pretending to be someone you're not and start becoming who you truly are. Have you ever said yes when every fiber of your being screamed no? It's as if you couldn't stop yourself, even though you knew it would drain you. Why does it feel so impossible to set boundaries, especially when it's someone else's need at stake? The truth is, you were never taught to protect your own energy. You were taught to give, to be there, to help, no matter the cost to yourself. But there comes a point when helping others becomes a form of self-neglect. Setting boundaries isn't selfish, it's necessary for survival. It's the only way to preserve your essence, your true self. The idea of saying no might trigger guilt, shame, or fear of rejection. But ask yourself, what's worse? Saying no and maintaining your integrity, or saying yes and losing yourself in the process? It's time to shift your perspective. Your boundaries are the line between your well-being and the demands of the world. They are the protective barriers that allow you to keep your power, instead of handing it out piece by piece until nothing is left. Saying no isn't an attack on others, it's an act of self-respect. When you say no, you affirm your right to exist as you are, not as others expect you to be. Think about the last time you said yes, despite feeling overwhelmed. What did that decision cost you? Your time? Your peace of mind? Your emotional energy? Now, imagine a version of yourself who can stand firm in the face of those demands. A version of you who doesn't collapse under the weight of others' expectations. This person isn't heartless. They understand that helping others can only be truly effective if it doesn't come at the expense of their own well-being. Boundaries aren't walls to shut people out. They are gates that allow only what serves you to enter and keep the rest at a safe distance. Establishing boundaries is not about becoming cold or detached. It's about becoming conscious of your worth and your needs. What are your non-negotiables? What are the things you absolutely cannot compromise on, without losing yourself in the process? Learning to say no means choosing yourself first, not in a selfish way, but in a way that allows you to show up as your best self for others. Your empathy is powerful, but it loses its value if it's given away without consideration. Your love, your attention, your energy, they should be freely given, but only when you have them to offer. A powerful tool to help with boundaries is visualization. Imagine your soul circle, a boundary made of pure light that only allows in what aligns with your values. Picture this circle expanding and contracting as you interact with the world. It's your sacred space, and you have the power to defend it. Another technique is the invisible sword, a mental tool that helps you slice through any pressure or manipulation that tries to make you violate your boundaries. It's a reminder that your boundaries are sacred and deserve respect, starting with your own. Now, let's talk about the concept of healthy selfishness. Yes, I'm telling you that selfishness, when applied consciously and responsibly, is not only healthy, it's essential. The idea that we must always be selfless is a myth. If you are constantly putting others before yourself, you are training the world to take from you without giving anything in return. True empathy becomes a gift when it is chosen, not when it's imposed upon you. So ask yourself, are you choosing to give your energy, or is it being taken from you? Are you truly empowered in your empathy, or have you become a slave to the demands of others? What if I told you that being empathetic isn't about being weak or giving everything you have to others? What if empathy could be your greatest strength, a weapon that you wield with precision and purpose? The truth is, a true empath doesn't just feel, they understand. They don't lose themselves in the emotions of others, they navigate them. And in that process, they become something far more powerful than the version of empathy we've been conditioned to believe in. It's time to redefine what it means to be an empath in today's world. A new kind of empath doesn't dissolve into others. They know that their empathy is a gift that needs boundaries, focus, and intentionality. They are aware of their own needs and emotions, and they use their heightened sensitivity to influence the world around them, without losing themselves in it. They no longer mistake their empathy for weakness, because they understand that true strength comes from choice. The power lies in their ability to choose where, when, and how to direct their energy. It's no longer about being constantly available. It's about being strategically present when it matters most. You see, an empath's strength doesn't come from being the doormat everyone steps on. It comes from being the mirror that reflects the truth. A mirror that holds space for others, but never forgets its own reflection. When an empath can fully integrate their sombra, the darker, hidden parts of themselves, they transform. They no longer fear the power that lies within. Instead, they learn how to harness it. They become present and dangerous in the sense that they are no longer easy to manipulate. Their energy is no longer given away on impulse. It is chosen and directed with precision. And this is where the magic happens. A true empath has the ability to influence not through force or sacrifice, but through presence. You don't have to collapse under the weight of the world to help it. You can stand firm, solid, and unshaken, and the world will bend to your presence. You've probably been told that the good ones must always sacrifice. That real empathy means you have to lose yourself. But here's the thing, the world doesn't need another martyr. It needs someone who is strong enough to stand in their own power and still care deeply for others. When you accept that you can influence without sacrificing yourself, you unlock the true potential of your empathy. You didn't come into this world to be absorbed by others' needs. You came to influence. You came to shape the narrative, not to get lost in it. Think about it. Why are you here? To become a passive participant in other people's lives? Or to take the reins, use your empathy consciously, and make a lasting impact on those around you? The world needs your wisdom, your clarity, and your power, not your exhaustion and self-abandonment. It's time to rise and embrace the full potential of your empathic nature, not as a burden, but as a source of influence and strength. So let me ask you, are you still dissolving yourself into the world, hoping to be loved for your kindness? Or are you ready to stand strong, grounded, and present, using your empathy as a force that can shift the very fabric of reality? The choice is yours, and it's time to step into your true power. Let me ask you something. When was the last time you truly felt in control of your empathy? Not overwhelmed by it, not drowning in the emotions of others, but fully aware of the power it holds within you. Can you even remember? The truth is, you've been living on autopilot, giving away pieces of yourself with every help you offer. You've been acting like you had to give everything in order to be loved, valued, or even worthy of existence. But here's the shocking truth. You are not weak. You simply forgot that you could choose. You can choose where to direct your energy. You can choose when to care and when to step back. And guess what? You can choose to protect your own peace. Your empathy, as powerful as it is, needs boundaries, because without them, it will never truly be a gift. Instead, it will continue to drain you, leaving you questioning why you feel empty despite giving so much. The moment you stop sacrificing yourself for others is the moment you reclaim your power. But here's the question, are you ready to choose? This isn't just about learning to say no. This is about learning to say yes to yourself. Yes to your own needs. Yes to your own worth. Yes to the freedom that comes with stepping out of the role of the martyr and into the role of the empowered empath. But remember, this shift doesn't happen overnight. It's a journey that requires you to confront the things you've been avoiding, the things you've stuffed deep within your unconscious, the very things that, once faced, will liberate you. Are you ready to face them? You've been conditioned to think that the more you give, the more you're loved, that your worth is tied to how much you sacrifice. But here's a reality check. True love doesn't require you to lose yourself. True empathy doesn't ask you to disappear into the background of other people's lives. When you're grounded in who you really are, You give from a place of strength, not obligation. You are not here to be consumed. You are here to influence the world around you. So, here's the challenge. Start making the choice to take control of your empathy. Start setting the boundaries that you know will protect your peace. Start owning your worth and your power. Because when you finally realize that your empathy is a gift and not a burden, you will see the world change in ways you never imagined. You are not just here to exist. You are here to make a difference. And the time to start is now. If you're ready to dive deeper into this journey, to learn more about how to balance your empathy with your own strength, then hit that subscribe button. Join me as we explore the path to living your most powerful, authentic life. Your empathy is a gift, but only if you learn to aim it.